I've been following your coverage because it's always amazing. Here's a couple of points I wrote down. The prosecution's direct examinations were painfully and unnecessarily long, detailed, bookish. The cross-examinations have been quick, pointed, effective, and merciful. A jury can wind up holding that against lawyers or come to like the other lawyers better for not wasting their time.
Yeah, I think the difficulty for the state is they really don't have a case on the legal merits. I mean, I think everyone would agree that Potter's conduct was negligent, which is civil liability, and she should lose her job and be sued and all that. The question is, does it rise to criminal conduct? And to be criminal, she would have to have intentionally ignored a risk of death that she was aware of. That's what recklessness is. That's what creates criminal culpability. But all the evidence tells us she had no idea that was a gun in her hand. She clearly believed it was a taser. So she was not intentionally ignoring a risk. Therefore, her conduct was not criminally reckless. And that's a problem the state just has not been able to overcome. So they've been saying a lot of words in their direct testimony, hours of it at a time from each witness, but none of it on the actual relevant legal question.
What's been stunning is it is going so poorly for the prosecution that now they were forced to file a motion to try to ask for permission to impeach their own witnesses. As you point out, the defense is just now starting its case. So all of this happened during the prosecution's case, where they put on Kim Potter's co-worker, her fellow officer, Sergeant Johnson. They put on her commander, Garrett Flesland. And those went very poorly for the prosecution. Now they want to impeach their own witnesses. What was it? I guess let's start with Johnson, if you know, Sergeant Johnson, her co-worker. What was so good for Kim Potter in that testimony that they now want it stricken? The prosecution to put it on.
The two officers with Potter at the arrest of Daunte Wright, the attempted arrest, were Officer Lucky, a trainee, and Officer Johnson, a very experienced sergeant. Officer Lucky said if he'd had the option, he would have tased Daunte Wright. Officer Johnson said he would have shot Daunte Wright. So those are the two other officers on the scene, and they both say, I would have done what Kim Potter intended to do or worse and been justified in doing that. Mm-hmm. So then, of course, these are the state's witnesses testifying. Right.
Yeah, so Sergeant Johnson got up there. He didn't have to be called, but the prosecution called him. And here's just a little snippet of how he sounded in speaking to this jury.
There was a statement by Officer Potter, I'm going to tase you. He didn't stop then either, did he?
No.
And if he had taken off with you in that car halfway, what would have happened to you? What would you think would be the worst that would happen?
Probably dragged.
Dragged and what?
Injured.
Seriously injured, maybe even dead, right?
Yes.
Would it be fair for that officer to use a firearm to stop him?
By state statute, yes.
So explain to the audience what that just established.
Johnson just indicated that the conditions for the lawful use of deadly defensive force in defense of him by another officer would be lawful under Minnesota statute. Obviously, if it's lawful, it's not criminally reckless. And this, again, is the state's witness.
If she had, in other words, if Kim Potter had intentionally taken out her firearm and shot Daunte Wright to death in that moment, it would have been legally justified. And what we're learning, as the case fills out, we learn more about him, Wright, and others, is this is not a good person. I mean, he was a serial criminal. It doesn't justify one way or another what happened that day. That's up to the jury. But
right. I mean, there's evidence the jury won't hear. For example, he had apparently an inch-long record of flight from arrest, non-appearances in court. So this is his modus operandi. This is what he did all the time.
Exactly. And unlike us, cops have experience in this neighborhood and understanding the risks and assessing that in a split second. Sometimes they do it well, sometimes they do it poorly. But there was testimony about this area and the risks that are in this area and how dangerous it would be. And then they found out this guy had an open warrant for him, Daunte Wright, and on a gun charge, a gun possession charge. Now they're like all these things for a cop in the moment escalate it. Another red flag, another reason to be concerned. And, you and I get to sit back here and the people in the courtroom and say, like, second guess, armchair quarterback, you should have done. But like, there's been testimony proving to this jury how fraught that situation was and how dangerous a guy Daunte Wright was.
And it's important not to forget there was also an order of protection taken out by a woman against Dante Wright. The officers weren't just protecting themselves. For all they knew, the woman passenger in the car was the woman being protected by this court order. And until they identified her, if they let him flee, for all they know, this is a kidnap.
That's right. Exactly right. So here's Kim Potter's commander, Garrett Flesland. So the question was, and I'm going to play a soundbite. I get this from Andrew because he does a great job of bringing us up to speed. Question, would it be right for an officer to stop a person from fleeing? I mean, duh, right? The commander says yes. A person who once stopped outside their car without a license, without ID, with a woman inside the car who might be the subject of a restraining order, would that be appropriate to stop that person? Yes. Was Officer Lucky reprimanded with respect to Dante Wright? No. Was Sergeant Johnson? No. Can it be reasonable to use deadly force if a fellow officer is partly inside a car that is trying to take off, where the cop would be dragged? Yes. Are traffic stops very dangerous? Yes. Even more so if you learn the person stopped has an arrest warrant out for a gun possession offense. Yes, he said, I would be extremely concerned for my own safety and about a gun being present in that situation. Can you use force to effect an arrest on a warrant and use force to stop said person from fleeing? Yes, you can, said the commander. And if he keeps fighting, after warning, he's going to be tased, and a fellow cop is lying over the passenger in the car, fighting to prevent flight by the suspect in his car, would it be right to use deadly force? Yes. Then comes what Andrew calls the kill shot of the cross-examination, which followed that exchange. Listen to the commander here.
How would you describe Kim Potter as a police officer?
She's a good cop. She's a good person. She's a friend. I have no concerns going to calls with her.
It's part of the training, trying to teach officers to think in stressful situations in real life.
Yes.
Would a good police officer try to make good decisions under pressure?
I expect good officers to make good decisions.
You did say that good officers make good decisions, correct? You just testified to that?
My hope is good officers make good decisions, yes.
And you did describe Kimberly Potter as a good officer, correct?
I did.
It's hard to believe I'm watching the prosecution's case.
Yeah, and every one of these officers who worked with her for 26 years think the world of her. She was a well-liked, well-respected officer who, let's face it, made a mistake when she pulled her gun, intending to go for the taser in highly tumultuous conditions. I mean, if this were a civil lawsuit, she would be able to bring up all of Dante Wright's conduct in this as contributory negligence to whatever her liability would be, because he played a role here too. But there's nothing in this case that appears to give rise to actual criminal culpability that justifies this criminal prosecution of her.
Mm-hmm. Andrew, this is not a Derek Chauvin. There's been testimony about what, if any, complaints were brought against Kim Potter. How many have been brought against her?
None. There's never been a complaint against her, not a use of force complaint. I guess 24 years ago, she crashed a police car, so she got reprimanded for that when she was a brand new officer. But since then, we're talking multiple decades, no reprimands, no complaints, and never a use of force complaint.